Slowly but surely, I hunted less and less with a rifle. After moving back to Minnesota and living in the shotgun-only zone, I went almost exclusively to the bow. And this is what I've learned.
A coyote kills a fox. It's typically what we call a competition killing, so they're not actually killing the fox to eat the fox.
Funding for this program was provided by the Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, Safe Basements of Minnesota, your basement waterproofing and foundation repair specialist since 1990. Peace of mind is a safe basement. Live Wide Open. The more people know about West Central Minnesota, the more reasons they have to live here. More at livewideopen.com. Western Minnesota Prairie Waters, where peace, relaxation, and opportunities await.
Some people do it for the big racks. Others for the freezer-filling protein. Some just appreciate the quiet solitude of the outdoors. As for me, I do it for all the above. But if I were to rank them, it would go in the opposite order. I grew up chasing whitetails in northwest Wisconsin during the traditional Thanksgiving week 9-day season. Once I was old enough to handle a .30-06, that became my rifle of choice for many years. While I enjoyed the tradition and camaraderie of our family's deer camp, the short season, travel, and costs of a non-resident license started to take their toll. While living in North Dakota, I'd heard stories from friends who had crest towering buttes in the Badlands while searching for mule deer. I had to try it. The rugged landscape and a new cervid species intrigued me as my past experiences dealt exclusively with whitetails and big patches of hardwoods. There was only one problem. Drawing a gun tag could take up to 5 years. Well, in order to scratch that itch, I drove over to the big sporting goods store in town and picked up a brand new bow. For residents, a statewide bow tag for whitetails or mule deer was easy to get, so the decision to begin bow hunting was made. Over the years, I was lucky enough to watch the sunrise over the Little Missouri River while taking some nice deer, including both mule deer and whitetail bucks. I even made it back to the old family stomping grounds in Wisconsin to take part in the archery season there. Slowly but surely, I hunted less and less with a rifle. After moving back to Minnesota and living in the shotgun-only zone, I went almost exclusively to the bow. And this is what I've learned. Bow hunting gives you the opportunity to hunt longer. The flexibility of picking and choosing which days you want to hunt allows you to stay home on days with bad weather or the wrong wind directions. Plus, it's just more fun when you can hunt all the time. If you have a certain buck on camera, you can spend the right amount of time trying to pattern him and hunt him when it makes sense. Now, there have been many times during the gun season where you have deer getting pushed from other hunters and shots have to be made on the run. Then they start to get nocturnal and they get harder to hunt. It's just more fun seeing deer in their natural movements. Sitting quietly in your stand allows the resident wildlife to go about their day uninterrupted, giving you a first-hand glimpse into the natural world, from pheasants to waterfowl to bears, coyotes, fox, and more. Even something as common as a squirrel might give you a peek into an intimate moment you won't see often. This may be my favorite part. While I routinely rely on wild game to supplement my diet and will happily take a doe if a large buck doesn't present an opportunity, I enjoy being surrounded by wildlife. And then given the chance to view them doing wild things without them knowing I'm there. While I easily could have shot this doe, I was still trying to hunt a buck that I got on camera. I've been trying for nearly 2 months now, but so far, he was winning. Just being this close to a group of deer like this, though, got the heart pumping, and while they knew something was up, they weren't quite sure where I was. Unfortunately, on the opening day of the gun season, my target buck was shot by a neighbor, and my priority changed to filling the freezer. And it's happened to me before. I pass up on some easy deer only to go the rest of the season without another opportunity. As you get near the end of the season, you tend to start taking chances. So we set up on a popular trail with an ambush location in mind. The wind was right, we were set up in time, but clearly something just looked out of place, and these deer weren't fooled. Thankfully, there'd be more to come. All I needed was one more step from this doe, and we'd have fresh venison tonight. But that wouldn't be the case. You excited to go out there, Dan?
Not really.
Let's go. Despite feeling a little under the weather, I talked Dan into coming out and filming me one more time. It was cold, spirits weren't very high, but I've been getting deer on camera, so we were going to give her one more try. But the deer came through on a different trail than I'd anticipated. I had a small window and took the shot.
Oh, there's kind of a loud crack when I shot. I think I smoked a tree. I don't know. Did they all run back across the road? I lost them after you shot. Yeah, they all turned and went that way. But they were getting all weird. And I was like, What did it sound like to you? Not hitting a deer. I mean, that could have been after pass-through. Yeah. Thought I heard my arrow hit a tree. It sure did. Smoked that tree. I don't know how I missed that deer though. I wonder if I went maybe right under it. Would have been standing. It would have been standing right there. Dang, she looks pretty clean. Doggone it.
So my tag went unfilled this season. Overall, I'm not mad about it. My stomach will miss the meals, but spending quality time in the stand is always worth it. The world's canines are a mix of wolves, jackals, fox, coyotes, and other members of the dog family. But like human relatives, they don't necessarily get along. That's especially true of foxes and coyotes that are moving into urban areas in increasing numbers. In 2019, University of Minnesota researchers started looking at the behaviors of fox and coyotes establishing their home ranges in the Twin Cities, 7-county metropolitan area.
We really wanted to get an idea of how these species are moving throughout urban landscapes, and then also get an idea of what kind of diseases these animals are carrying, what they're eating, and also get kind of a sense for where hotspots for risk of conflict between humans and wildlife are in the metro. Foxes often den under decks, under people's houses, where we don't see that with coyotes at all. This is partially due to the foxes selecting areas where they can avoid running into coyotes, because coyotes do pose an immediate risk to the life of any fox they run into. When a coyote kills a fox, it's typically what we call a competition killing. So they're not actually killing the fox to eat the fox. They're concerned about foxes eating more of the rabbits and squirrels that they might be eating. What we see with coyotes is they seem to select more of the green spaces. And so they'll try to avoid people, and their avoidance in these green spaces kind of gives an opportunity to foxes to get away from coyotes in the more heavily human-used landscapes.
To study the wild canines, Jeff Miller started capturing and collaring them in the fall of 2019. Last October, he showed us a trap site.
This is close to downtown Minneapolis. We caught a gray fox just like 20 yards that way. We know that there's a red fox and a coyote in this area as well. So we've got all three canines right across from downtown. In this case, we're using a dirt hole set with a foothold trap, and to make sure that we're not catching any domestic animals in this set, we actually cover just with a bucket lid during the day and a rock, so that even if somebody's dog finds it, they shouldn't be able to get this cover off of the trap. And then we also use other methods of trapping, such as cable restraints, and with those you just simply close the loop that the animal would get caught in. We do that during the day to close them down, and we also use box traps occasionally, and that's just simply closing down the trap. The trap is actually buried right here, and there's a hole down that way with a little bit of bait and a lure, and that's how we attract the animal to this area. Canines are really intrigued by holes and they'll come and investigate. It does attract quite a variety of carnivores, so you'll get raccoons in urban settings, you'll also get the occasional opossum. Dogs are really attracted to these sites as well, but we take all precautions to make sure that we do not catch any domestic animals in our traps. So wherever we have a trap out in a public area, we will make sure there are signs posted so that people know that there's wildlife research going on in the area. Once we get an animal in a live trap, we'll tranquilize it. During the processing, we'll put a GPS collar on the animal. We'll take a blood sample. We'll check for different diseases. It'll be about 45 minutes total that the animal is totally under anesthesia. And after about 45 minutes of recovering, that's typically when an animal is released. We take hair samples, and through measuring different isotopic signatures in hair samples, we can actually determine how much human food the animal has been incorporating in its diet. And then we also take fecal samples to test for different internal parasitic diseases, so intestinal parasites. In urban environments, you have less habitat, less of these selected habitats, such as green spaces, wooded areas, grassy areas, where these species can actually go. So when they're confined to these smaller green spaces, they're more likely to come in contact with each other and more likely to spread the diseases.
Over 2 seasons, researchers caught and collared 16 red and 2 gray foxes and 17 coyotes. We checked back with Jeff in April to see what the study analyses had shown so far.
One of the surprising things that we found was actually how low the survivorship is for red foxes compared to coyotes. We were finding that about 80% of the coyotes that we collared will survive from one year to the next, whereas red foxes have a really low survivorship actually. So they have around 20% of the population will survive from one year to the next. Foxes seem to be getting mange at a higher rate than coyotes are. From 17 foxes, it looks like 4 or 5 of those animals are then going to have mange. Mange is actually a small mite that lives on these animals. It burrows into the hair follicles of the animal, and that's what causes the really dramatic hair loss and scabbing that you see in these animals. It's a really communicable disease, so it spreads pretty rapidly throughout these populations and can have a pretty detrimental impact on the populations themselves. 2 of the red foxes that we collared that were killed by coyotes had mange in some form, so that could have contributed to them being less mobile and then being caught by a coyote. And also we've had one of the foxes with mange got hit by a car. So mange has the potential to alter their behaviors in ways that it makes them more likely to die either directly from mange or as a secondary result of mange.
The study also tested for coronavirus, but none showed up. However, 90% of the metro animals have, or in the past have had, canine parvovirus or distemper. We asked Jeff how the increased presence of these animals could impact urban residents, particularly coyotes, that many call varmints.
Coyotes do have this kind of reputation of being mean, but I think that's just kind of a bad reputation that coyotes have in general. As humans, we sometimes conflate intelligence because intelligent animals can be more of a nuisance with being a bad animal. You may think your dog is smart and dogs evolved from wolves, but coyotes actually have a higher brain mass ratio to body weight than wolves do, so they're highly intelligent animals. Any carnivore that's intelligent is gonna cause potential for problems with pets, especially in the spring when coyotes are denning. They want to protect their young from run-ins with other canines, because in the wild, another canine might be a wolf that would try to kill their young. The bolder a coyote is, the more likely it is to get into a confrontation with a human. And so feeding wildlife is one thing that should really be avoided. When you see a coyote that's acting bold, you should yell at that coyote and teach it that coming into contact with a person is not a thing they should want to do. Throwing things at coyotes, yelling at them, making yourself look big, and basically showing them that you're the one in charge in this interaction. And that will actually ensure that the coyotes can live in these landscapes without coming into conflict with humans and their pets. These animals are here to stay. There's really no management solution that will keep coyotes from moving into the cities. One of the things that might make Minneapolis and St. Paul a little different than other metropolitan areas such as Chicago is that there's this green space that kind of breaks right through the center of these cities. So the Mississippi River goes right through downtown Minneapolis, downtown St. Paul. That really gives these animals an avenue to move through these really urban areas. If we control coyote populations in the cities, they're going to move back in. We're going to have to get used to coyotes and foxes being around, because both of these animals are throughout these areas.
Longtime Prairie Sportsman chef Kurt Anderson lives on in the delicious wild game recipes we filmed before his passing in January of 2019.
My friends, item that I love for fall, this is going to be grilled rabbit with apple chutney. A little bit of a twist on the chutney. As you see the recipe, you're going to note that there's a few things that usually were in chutney that I didn't necessarily put in there. Nuts is one of them, raisins is another, okay? Now the chutney recipe works, and I want to show you what I got sitting in the back of the stove here. You cook it, you got to be careful. I'm almost to that point where I've cooked it too much, but you want it to get to this nice golden dark look, this color. That's just the sugars that are releasing. That's going to make it twice as good when it goes on top of your meat. And you won't add any other juice other than that. Here you can see I've got the rabbit cooking, and on this rabbit I've added nothing more than just a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm using that indoor grill pan instead of outside. Boom! This is the way it's looking. It's a little thick. I'm touching it like this just to see if any juices are going to run and that those juices are clear. But let's jump over here. Chutney 101. Here's what I want to have you see. This is everything I used to make this amount here. This would be enough for 2 people, or me alone in one case. This goes really well. Think of it as a sweet and sour apple mixture, apple sauce, so to speak. So these are our apples right out on the tree. Peel them, dice them small, dice your onion a bit smaller than your apple. Otherwise you'll get too much of that onion flavor. You can see I've added butter here. I've added brown sugar. To that we've got suggestions here for the water and for the vinegar so that we'll be able to follow through with that recipe. And then it's just roasting at very low heat, very low heat. So if we take our carrots and have them poached and hot, we put our rabbit that's grilled on top of that. Here comes the magic stuff. Now this to me is always something that brings back memories of fall, and I maybe don't need all of it. I had enough for 2, but I want you to give that a try. It's excellent. It's not too sweet. The vinegar gives it a little bit of a sharpness, a little bit of backing off there. The rabbit, which is very neutral meat, it'll accept everything. So you're going to find that this becomes a very, very healthy and good lunch. Thanks for watching.
True or false? Waterfowl contribute to the spread of invasive zebra mussels. False. Laboratory studies of ducks found the waterfowl are not very efficient at carrying zebra mussel larvae. If they were, our shallow lakes and wetlands would quickly become infested. In Minnesota, more than 50 lakes are managed for migratory waterfowl, and none are infested with zebra mussels. Infestations are typically found in popular recreational lakes and rivers where there is an abundance of people, boats, docks, and water toys. We can stop aquatic hitchhikers from infesting more lakes and streams by cleaning up everything we pull out of the water. It's a simple drill. Clean in, clean out. Before leaving a water access, clean your boat and water equipment. Remove and dispose of all plants and aquatic species in the trash. Drain water from your boat, ballast tanks, motor, live well, and bait container. Remove drain plugs and keep drain plugs out while transporting equipment. Dispose of unwanted bait in the trash. To keep live bait, drain the water and refill the bait container with bottled or tap water. And if you have been in infested waters, also spray your boat with high-pressure water. Rinse with very hot water. Dry for at least 5 days. Stop the spread of AIS. Funding for this segment was provided by the Aquatic Invasive Species Task Forces of Wright, Meeker, Yellow Medicine, Lac qui Parle, and Big Stone counties. Funding for this program was provided by the Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, Safe Basements of Minnesota, your basement waterproofing and foundation repair specialist since 1990. Peace of mind is a safe basement. Live Wide Open. The more people know about West Central Minnesota, the more reasons they have to live here. More at livewideopen.com. Western Minnesota Prairie Waters, where peace, relaxation, and opportunities await.